Okay, yeah, our next speaker is Loïc from ESRF, and I'm sure one of the many reasons, but one of the sort of magnets of this event was to learn the latest and greatest about H5Web, and here it is.
Yeah, just passed the link to the presentation. If people want to follow it at the same time. Oh, it's not the right one. This is the right one. Okay, sorry about the setting up issues. So thank you for the introduction. My name is Loïc Huder. I'm working as a software engineer at ESRF. So you can see the photos that Andy showed this morning, but on the other side of the mountains. I'm the main developer of H5Web with my colleague Axel, which is also in the audience. And the aim of this presentation is to present H5Web, basically, and to kickstart the discussion that we can have on Thursday about H5Web. So for those who don't know about H5Web, H5Web is a web-based viewer for HDF file. It is written in React, which is a new front-end framework, and it uses visualization with WebGL. That means that visualization are using the graphic cards of the computer, so are very efficient. And we spend quite a lot of time to design this visualization, so that's why I want to stress this point. Because development happened in the frame of a project at ESRF, we support the Nexus standard, which was already presented by several speakers before me. And but we are open to support other ontologies if the needs arise. Well, we can see this in the discussion on Thursday, as I said. So rather than continuing to talk in the wind like this, I will just make a small demo. So I click on this. You can click as well on the image here of H5Web to launch the demo. This is our landing page where we demonstrate the different ways that H5Web can get the data. I will talk a bit later about this in more detail, but what I want to show here is the H5Web way of accessing data. So basically, in this case, the file is located on a distant server, and the H5Web package is based on H5 takes some metadata out of the file and returns them to H5Web. So the main thing is that the files are located on a distant server, and H5Web allows to browse this file. And I can browse here a file that is called water224.h5 that is stored on the remote server. Sorry. And so this is the H5 Web Interface. On the left side, we have a panel where we can look at the hierarchy of the Nexus file, or it's Nexus file, but it's an HDF file. So groups can be open and closed. We can look at some data sets and the value of these data sets. So this is Scholar data sets that has only a value DAU. This is the main part of the H5Web program, where this panel can be used to display the value of a data set as I've just shown, or we can also toggle it to inspect the data set. So in this case, we are looking at the metadata of the HDF entity. So in this case, the path, name, the type of the data set, the shape, in this case, the Scholar, and so on. If we look at another entities, for example, I will go back to the root group. In this inspect panel, we can also see the attributes that are attached to this entity. In this case, there are several attributes, HDF version, for example, NX class, which is a Nexus attribute, and so on and so forth. Because we are using the Nexus standard, and the Nexus standard basically is a way to organize the data and also to put some metadata to describe what plot should be displayed when you are looking at a particular entity. So in this case, when looking at the root group, Nexus tells you that the default plot that should be displayed is the plot of entry 000, and I can click on this to navigate to the entry 00 entity, and in this case, the default plot is the one of this group here called result, and this plot plots the signal, which is the intensity here, versus the wave number Q. And these are stored in different datasets. So this is just some Nexus way of describing a plot. And using the display data, H5Web understands this Nexus ontology and display a default plot where we can see the intensity that is stored in this dataset I versus the wave number Q stored in this dataset. And so this is a line visualization that we have developed, as I said, using WebGL. And you can see that we have all the interactions that you would expect from a plotting library. So for example, we can change the scale of the axis here. So for example, if I want a log-log plot instead, I can change both scales. We can toggle in and out the errors. This is a Nexus feature, but this is something that we also add. We can use point to look at the data rather than a line, or both, well, and so on. And we added lately a new feature to export datasets. So for example, this is quite useful when you are looking at files that are located on a remote server and you are only interested in one single dataset. And so using this button, we can export to NPY or to CSV file. So this is the Nexus visualization that plots one dataset compared to another. But if I look at another dataset, if I look at really a dataset and not a Nexus plot, I have other choices rather than the line visualizations that I've just shown. Let's just go back to linear here. I have the matrix visualization also that allow to show the raw data basically. And again, we made an optimization here because the table that you can see here is a visualise table. That means that it loads only the data that it needs to load here to display it. So it can be used also, here the dataset is not very huge, is not very big, but it can be used to display in a table form the data of very big datasets as well without performance issues because this is a virtualized table. So just to mention, because we made a lot of improvements into the optimization of visualization and of other stuff to be able to use H5Web for very big files with very big datasets. So this was a 1D dataset. We can look at a 2D dataset. Not this one. This one is not very interesting. I like this one. Okay. So we have this heat map visualization for 2D datasets that shows, basically 2D data with a color mapping. We can change the range of this color mapping here. Sorry. Using this slider tool here, spend a lot of time on this. We can change the normalization of the color range. So I can use log scaling here to have a better view of the data. So this is some kind of diffraction data. You can change the range of the color map itself, sorry. And again, we have the export. We have some other features here, but we also have the export button to change to TIFF and PY as well. Another feature that we added quite recently was a way to draw a rectangle to look at a particular place of the data. This is something that we didn't have at first, and well, we saw that it could be quite useful. And of course, it's not working because of demo effect. Yes, this is because I released the key too fast. And we can also reset the zoom to go back to the previous view. All the new interactions that we added are summarized in this little button here, where we added some help to show the interaction. So this is for 2D data, for a 2D visualization for a 2D dataset. We can have a 1D visualization for a 2D dataset using the line. And in this case, because this is a 1D visualization, we can only display a 1D slice of the 2D data. And we can use this slider to choose the slice that we want to display. And again, I want to stress that this is quite optimized in the sense that H5Web will only request the data for the slice that we are visualizing right now. So that means that even if the data set here was 10 millions, I will only fetch the 1,000 points I need to display this slice. Again, this is to make the visualization quite performant for big data sets. And also something that I would like to mention is here when we explore the file, in fact, we fetch the metadata only when we need it. So for example, if I am at the very beginning of the file here, the metadata that will be fetched will be only the metadata of the root group and of this group. And once I go inside the file, H5Web will make some request to the remote server to get the metadata, so that, again, things are quite optimized and the H5Web can open data with, I don't know, 20 million groups in it without problem. Okay, so this was it for my demo of H5Web. Also, in the previous presentation at the European user group, I showed that you can use H5Web yourself using the JupyterLab extension that brings the Hdf browsing inside the notebook. So this is the JupyterLab extension, JupyterLab H5Web, that you can install yourself if you are using JupyterLab. And here the GIF shows that basically you can double-click on an Hdf file in your JupyterLab browser and have access to all the features that I've just shown on the demo. And you can also do it in the notebooks. This is a nice feature that we added if you want to do some data analysis and look at the data that you are analyzing in the Hdf file at the same time. Oh. Go back. Just remove this. Well, okay. Yep. Go back, go back. Great. Okay, so these are the summary of the demo for people that did not see the presentation. Also, what I wanted also to have a few words about the H5Web architecture. So as I said, H5Web is a front-end application that lives inside your browser when you open H5Web, and it needs to request the data to a provider. And the way it does it is, as I said, very optimized. It only fetches the data that it needs to display the current groups in the hierarchy, and it only requests the current data it needs for the current visualization. And it's up to another application that is called the provider to load the Hdf file and to respond to the request of H5Web and to return the requested metadata and data. So this provider can be, as just demonstrated, on a remote server. So I've shown one with H5 Growth, but it can also work with HSDS. So for example, if you have HSDS on a remote server, you can use H5Web to get data inside HSDS, and yes, it will work on your personal computer. The way the JupyterLab extension works is that the server, the provider, let's say, is brought to your personal computer, and that means that the JupyterLab server is launched on your own computer and can open files locally, whereas here you are looking at files that are remote. And that means that the H5Web application in the browser will request things to the JupyterLab server that also runs on your computer. And quite recently, you can also put the provider directly in the browser, thanks to the H5 WASM project that Brian will present just afterwards. And that means that in this, using this part, you don't need an external server anymore. You can just load the HSDF file directly in the browser as a binary blob, and it will be the job of H5Web to do all these extraction of data and metadata and to respond to the request of H5Web. And this is quite nice because this means that, in fact, now using this H5Web project, you can use the H5Web demo here to look at any kind of HDF file sorry, let me rephrase this. You can use the H5Web demo to upload any kind of HDF file that you are looking at and use H5Web to browse it. And I don't think we have HDF files here, but for the demonstration, I had one in the Google Drive, I think. Yes. I'll just show you. Okay. So here I've downloaded an HDF file, and I can use the file picker. It will be in download, I think. Yeah. And here, so this is in the local disk, right? And I can open it, and I can directly use H5Web to browse this HDF file that I've just downloaded from the drive. And in this case, it's just to show you that this HDF file contains some complex data, and to show you that H5Web also supports complex data and can display the matrix visualization and also some visualization mode for example, the amplitude or the phase of the complex numbers. And I would like also to thank Brian for this very nice project, because this is a very nice demo that we have now. Of course, it has a limitation because you need to upload the HDF file as a binary blob inside the browser. So if you have a very huge file of a few gigabytes, then of course the browser will say, no, this is way too big, don't do it. Anyway, a final word about the H5Web visualization. Because we use a React frontend that allows to reuse parts of the application in other applications. So for example, the way we've done the JupyterLab extension is to take the whole viewer as an application and to reuse it in JupyterLab. But we can also do more finer tuning, let's say, by taking only the visualization part and reuse it in other React applications. So all the work that we have done to design this performant WebGL visualization can be capitalized on in other web applications. And we provide this visualization in a NPM package that is called H5Web lib. And we use this visualization component to look at any kind of data. It can be data that can be an HDF file, but it can be data that is coming from another source. It doesn't really matter. It's a whole visualization library for React, basically. And so we use it for general purpose data acquisition using daiquiri, which is a React application at ESRF. We also use it for diffraction data acquisition and in development for tomography reconstruction. And we have a very nice prototype with tile-based views. So this is like Google Map, where when you zoom in, the level of detail changes. It's very nice, but I can't show it because I cannot zoom with this touchpad, sorry. Anyway, I invite you to check it out, it's very nice. And also, I think I'm running out of time. Anyway, this is my final slide. I just wanted to show you that H5Web can be used at several levels. So the demo that I've shown you is to be able to browse HDF data remotely. You can use the JupyterLab extension to browse HDF file locally. And also using the H5Web project, now you can just drop an HDF file inside the browser and use H5Web to visualize it. So this is a very nice entry point if you don't want to install the extension. And we can also use it to visualize data in React application. So this is a bit more if you are interested in the web development. So not everyone is interested by that, but I think it was still a nice thing to mention. The point also I want to make is that the HDF file can be Nexus or not. It really doesn't matter. Nexus is on the top of it to have some default plot, to have some meaningful plot in addition to the data that you have inside the HDF file. But H5Web also works for generic HDF data. It uses the lines, the heat map visualization, doesn't really matter. External development really enhanced the project. The select to zoom feature that I've shown you was originated because we were working in the diffraction data viewer. So if you think that you have some use case for H5Web, or if you see something that interests you, well, get in touch with us. There is a discussion on Thursday on room 2. Or if you don't want to come or you cannot come, for whatever reason, you can still get in touch with us using this email address, h5web@esrf.fr. We are looking actively for user feedback, so don't hesitate to write us or to come at the discussion. Thank you very much. Was I a bit too long, or?
No, perfect. Thank you for
great.
keeping us on time this late hour. Are there any questions for Loïc? Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks for the talk. I have actually 2 questions. The first question is, if I understand correctly, your entry point is always one HDF file. So
yes.
How does it work if we have several?
If you have several HDF files, if you want, you will always look at one HDF file at the time. This is how we design the project. The viewer will look only at one file at the time.
But
now,
if you are speaking, how do you specify the file already?
Sorry?
What is not clear to me is already the first question is how do you specify the file is part of the URL?
Yes.
You need to know the file name.
Yes. In the case, if I go back to the demo here, so for example, this server that is, so for example, I can look at HSDS. We have a HSDS instance that is on a remote server, and I have compressed, for example, I have this file that is compressed, and here we've deployed, such as the file can be in the URL here.
Okay. And second question, you said that you can't, you support something else than Nexus, so like the HDF file. My question is, how do you know how to plot the data?
Can you repeat the question?
So you said that you support Nexus, but
yes.
you also support their HDF file. So how do you know how to plot the data? I give you an example. We have a case where we have component type, where we have one field which is a time vector and the other which is data. So how how can I plot this?
So the question is, how can we plot a component datasets with with H5Web?
Yes.
You cannot. You cannot right now. The way it does it, as I said, what we have done here, because the development that we needed to do at ESRF was to do the Nexus, to support the Nexus ontology. And we don't use component dataset at ESRF. But if you think that you have a use case to plot component datasets with one field with respect to the other, then get in touch and we can develop some things for it.
Okay, so we can, do you have some documentation of if we want, for instance, to try to develop a new ontology or?
No, because so far, the way we done it is that we are actively developing based on user feedback. And when I say we, it's Axel and I. And because the way we drive the project is that we wait for user feedback before doing some abstraction, some documentation, and so on.
Okay.
And so far, the need for other ontology didn't arise from user feedback because we had only feedback from ESRF staff, and ESRF staff are quite happy with the Nexus standard. And we also have feedback from other institutes as well, but this was always based on the Nexus standard. Now, this is really a call for action here. If you think that you have some ontology that can fit in H5Web, then come at the discussion on Thursday, get in touch with us, send us an email, and we can discuss and then we will try to develop something, and if possible, we will try to develop the extraction so that in the future, other ontology can be easier to develop.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely, we will be there on that.
I can complete the first question. So the way we've developed the viewer, the H5Web viewer, is it's basically a package that you can install as well. So at the moment, we provide the JupyterLab extension as a ready-made thing that you can deploy anywhere and access your files. But you're right that H5Web, the viewer itself, doesn't provide a way to access the files. But so you are free to develop an application that uses the viewer to adapt to whatever infrastructure you have, however you store your files and so on. So you have to add the layer on top. And this can be the same for the ontology. If we find that adding an ontology is a bit complex into the viewer itself because you know, it's not necessarily, it's a bit too complex for deploying for everyone, for example, then we can discuss making it a bit more flexible and deploying multiple packages for different ontologies, for example. Yeah.
Hi, Loïc. So
Hello.
congrats for a very nice tool. Is the plan to integrate it into the data catalog that you have at ESRF?
The data, what do you mean, the data catalog, the data portal?
ICAT, yes.
Yes. In fact, it's already integrated inside the data portal. You are a ESRF user, or?
I sign in anonymously.
Yeah.
Couldn't find any Nexus data.
In H5B? Or in the data portal?
In the data portal.
In the data portal, if you look at your proposal, you have table with all the files, and if there are HDF files, you will have in the table a small button to open it inside H5Web. So this is already something that we have deployed.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, there's another question.
Hi, Luke. Nice presentation. I am new in this.
Sorry, can you speak a bit louder because I can understand?
Yes, I will remove this. I am new in this Nexus HD5, so I'm new in this one. I have worked with JavaScript before, and I really like the fact that you can run it everywhere. Is this kind of viewer, is it possible to run in Electron or so to make it a standalone applications or?
This is something that we have in mind, in fact. I think there was some discussion that was launched by Gert about having a VS Code extension, for example. And this is kind of the same thing, like having some headless browsers that can run H5Web. This is not something that we have worked on right now, but this is, if the need arise, I can clearly see that we can develop some things around it, yes.
Okay.
So the quick answer is so far no, there is no way of doing it, but we can develop something for it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, good. Keep them coming.
Thanks for the nice talk. So you mentioned that you basically work with users and you gather their feedback and continue development. So as far as I know, at ESRF, you write, or the beamlines write their own HDF files?
Almost, yes.
Almost, yeah. Have you heard of use cases when they used Dectris H5 files to be displayed with your tool?
No, because so far, I think H5Web is mostly used for processed data and not really for data that is acquired. Like, the Nexus is added after processing, for example. In the case of diffraction data, once you've done the azimuthal integration and so on. So, not yet.
And is the work with virtual datasets implemented in H5Web?
Thank you for the nice question, because this is something that I would like to mention, but I forgot to. The way it does it, as I explained, it is up to the provider to access the HDF file and to return the data and the metadata. So it's really up to the provider, in this case can be H5Wasm, can be H5Web, can be HSDS, to do the virtual dataset resolution and in more general way, external links or soft links resolution. So if the provider supports it, then H5Web, it will be completely transparent for H5Web, because then that means that the provider will fetch the data in another file, but H5Web will not care. It will get the metadata and the data that it needs to do the visualization. So in the case of HSDS, it works. In the case of H5Web, it works. For H5Wasm, I think it doesn't work for now.
Thanks.
Great questions. Any other questions? I mean, it actually might work since my understanding is H5Wasm uses just the standard Hdf5 library. If you open a virtual data set and start reading from it, it should just work.
Well, Brian can comment on this, but I think from the latest things that I saw, we display the link as unresolved entity for now. And so this is for links. And for virtual dataset, I'm not really sure. So perhaps it will have something to say about it.
Okay. Great work. Loïc will be around, so
yes.
Keep your questions for Thursday or tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great presentation. And yeah, so just staying with the same theme, Brian is our next speaker who created H5Wasm. And yeah, this is something at the HDF group, we keep discovering that, yeah, with this community, there's no shortage of talent out there. And for example, we always thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to have some kind of a form on our web page where, let's say you're a poor graduate student and somebody just gave you an Hdf5 file and you don't know what to do with it. And then by happenstance, you discover the HDF group homepage. And then wouldn't it be great if there were a form and say, hey, you have an Hdf5 file, don't know what to do with it, just want to peek at it, just drag and drop it here. And automatically something opens, and that's what we just saw. So we always thought about creating it, but it exists. We don't have to create it, it's out there.